not only Slava is one of the top YC founders, having raised more than 800, 800, that would be too much, 180 million for his YC startups, Mighty Buildings and Intently. But not many know that before switching to being a founder, he was a prominent hardware investor, having invested in 2 unicorns out of 17 seed investments. So he has been across both sides of the table, which is pretty damn useful, I'd say, right? In terms of knowing how to react when you raise. As you already know, Slava will tell you about his secret parallel fundraising method. And while many of you have probably guessed what this is or how it works, the devil is in the details. I truly believe that. And so today we'll dive into some of those details. But we only have an hour, so obviously we can't cover everything. And so one thing I wanted to share before we start is we have a new bootcamp that's kicking off together with Slava, where we'll be able to help some of you who are raising to do that in a more kind of hands-on approach. I'll share some of the details at the end before the Q&A session, but for now, I guess let's proceed to the fun part. Slava, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Cool to see over 100 people now. Folks, as you probably already heard, I wasn't just a founder for the last 6 years. Before that, I was actually VC, and that allowed me to uniquely build neural chains, which essentially connecting how you pitch as a startup, how you raise a startup, and how you invest as a VC, how you find those top founders, top targets, I should say, as a VC. So all of these connected in my brain. And partially it became one of the reasons why we were successfully raising for Mighty and Intently, just because it also helped me, my prior background. Let me start sharing the screen, and I want to make sure you can see it. Is it seen well?
Yeah, give it a sec. I see it's loading. All right, yeah. I think it's good. But yeah, folks, please do let us know that everything works. Okay, I see that in the chat, folks saying that it works. So go ahead.
So, folks, we want to specifically focus on what changed, in the market situation, since last couple of years, because a lot of what I was doing before, especially for Mighty Buildings, we build a really rigorous, great process, and learn from a lot of other founders, successful founders. But now this playbook is becoming even more needed and important, just because the current market situation is pretty bad. You definitely want to run the process to be successful. So we'll talk more about market conditions now, and then we'll introduce the parallel fundraising. Fundraising task force is one of the instruments you should be building to essentially catalyze your process and get more interest. And then we'll go to nitty-gritty of details of actually how you run the process and how you can use automation for that, right? So we will also spend a little bit of time on fuck-ups, but during Q&A, we'll dive deeper, what don'ts have really, and what you really try to avoid, especially in current market situation. After each section, we'll have 5 minutes for quick Q&A, and Alexander will pick maybe 2, 3, 4 questions if you have time. So market conditions, as you folks probably know, fundraising is known to be very, very stressful, frustrating, for most of us is, and for me as well, right? But I learned how to turn this into actually pretty, I wouldn't call it enjoyable, but really fulfilling experience, I should say, right? Because you definitely want to try to raise in very condensed time, because a lot of times it takes months, and for some people take years to raise money for startups. So you're getting distracted from your business. You as a CEO and co-founder should definitely spend most of your time during the lifespan of the company on building actual business, not raising money. And because it occurs repeatedly, for most of startups, you have to raise money at least 2-3 times. You essentially want to do it properly, so you're actually enjoying building a startup instead of raising money. So it doesn't have to be that way, right? I co-founded startups that raised over 180 million, various rounds of financing, lots of different nuances, and all the time I was using parallel fundraising. And we'll talk more about what it actually means. But before that, let's talk about environment. So you probably know that seed rounds are down by 27% for last year, and it's not just the situation on the actual seed round, and the Series A actually went down as well. It's a lot. What changed was actually about why is this specific startup is relevant to this current moment, to this slowdown, to this basically. For some sectors, there is like exceptions, AI maybe and climate, but for majority of sectors, like why now is absolutely important. And this is data from DocSend, so we believe is like really down to the details what investors are looking at right now. So basically, we need to build a tight process, build very condensed process, but still prepare for a longer time frame compared to what used to be. Another thing which changed is dramatically lowered conversions from the reach out, and we're talking mostly about warm reach outs today, but cold also changed. Like basically from the reach out to the meeting, we see like a lot of drop as well. So it means you need to activate more investors in your funnel, and that basically pretty requiring even more job, right? So we don't see seed rounds anymore without traction, even for repeat founders. Just to give you example, we went with Intently, my second YC company, to YC badge, pretty much with very early stage idea because we were like repeat founders. They let us go. But we had to work really hard to generate the traction for the demo day, because otherwise I'm sure we wouldn't be able to raise money even like regardless of all our prior success with Mighty Buildings. So attention span of investors also dropped, right? You're really having hard times now reaching out to people. A lot of these started changing during COVID, when like all investors turned to Zoom for the first meetings, and like companies like DocSend, SlideShare, like they changed the way you interact with investors a lot, especially if you go cold, right? So basically, right now we're seeing like 2 minutes per successful DEX. But remember, we are talking here like this data DocSend is primarily about cold process. So people who are sending these decks are primarily using cold process, meaning they're just reaching out to people. Because if you go warm, there is no reason to add the deck to the email, reach out email actually, because you'll share your deck after the call, after the initial call. So basically 2 minutes, even for successful companies, and this is really hard, to build a deck which will grasp potential of investor in 2 minutes is really hard. For most of us, really hard. And I'm proposing to think of this as like, if you go cold, you only have 2 minutes on average, according to DocSend. But if you go warm, through introductions, and we'll talk more about what it means actually, you can get 30 minutes, because this is a typical Zoom call, introduction Zoom call with all VCs, right? So 30 minutes is a lot of time. You can explain your idea better, you can answer questions, you can do so much more, right? As a result, you can increase the conversion of those meetings to actual diligence process. But it takes a lot of preparation work to go warm, and we'll talk more about this. So one of the learnings we got from reports like DocSend is you actually have only the average time frame for fundraising now changes, increased to 16 weeks. And companies that successfully raise within 6 weeks, just about 10% from those who raised. And this is very small fraction, right? But you want to try to be within this 10%, because what is changing after 16 weeks is you actually becoming, I wouldn't be afraid to use this word, like a spoiled fruit, right? So investors would treat you as someone who may not be necessarily as sexy as a startup, or may not know how to raise money. Both things are big enough reason for a lot of people to pass. And investors community is very tight. So people know when you start raising, they just talk to each other basically. So the challenge is how to get within these 16 weeks with your process and be within this 10%. I would even put a little more challenge here. Like I would target for 7 to 12 weeks. Before I would go for like for seed round, something like within 6 weeks, like before the slowdown. But now let's aim for 2x. The reason why, because again, this is docs and stats. You can see like a lot of funding still happening within this 12 weeks time frame, and quite a few still happen in this like gray zone, right? So like which is about 25% of all financing, but you definitely don't want to be in the dead zone, right? Just because very few actually founders able to pursue and really raise money like over like weeks and weeks of this process. I know that some founders did that, but like as I said, like if you going like in condensed process, you can focus your time and essentially prioritize your work on your business, and B, you can have this like really nice FOMO, which is created natively in the parallel process, and we'll talk more about this. So you can potentially enjoy better terms and just like have more time on actually building business. Another great way of looking at this is a lot of startups actually drop from the process of fundraising within 12 weeks. And this is also changing in 23. So basically, lots of people starting prematurely. I wouldn't call prematurely, just like not checking all the metrics according to the current market dynamics, right? So, and then you only realize when you already start the process that you are not your current traction doesn't meet the requirements of the market, right? So a lot of people bow out early in the process, and you definitely don't want to do that. And we'll talk more about how exactly you can understand if you're ready for fundraise, whether it's seed round or Series A, before actual launching campaign. And final piece on this, a lot of time in VCs now spending, a lot of focus spending on traction and competition. And these two things are actually interconnected. If you have like stronger competition, you should have more traction. And for instance, this was a case for Intently, my second YC company. Like we went through the last winter batch, winter 23, and we had very different, dramatically different situation when we were like undergoing Y Combinator program a year ago. And then like we actually developed a product and launched it this September. The market situation last September, market situation changed so dramatically that you see like 400 AI sales tools emerge. A lot of them just were like pretty much in the stealth mode when we were like launching. Could you have like done the better job guessing this situation would happen with like emergence of ChatGPT and all this LLM thing? Sure, 100%, because sales is such a big market. Like a lot of people are starting approaching that, right? So we end up like pivoting away from the sales market altogether. We now, as Intently, in the so-called go-to-network automation, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later in the slides. But basically, as a learning, I want to share with everyone, if you are in the red ocean market, like market with lots of competition, you definitely want to have very crystal clear value proposition confirmed by traction. It's not enough to have like clear pitch slides, how you differentiate yourself. Very clearly, very strong product market fit, even for seed round, right? And definitely for Series A. So with this, let's open the floor for a few questions on what was just shared on the market situation. Is anything we want to talk now? Oh, Alexander? So, okay, let's move on. So parallel fundraising. So that's essentially a name which it's hard to say who first introduced it, but we learned about this during YC Series A program with Mighty Buildings. We actually went not only through the basic program, but also Series A and growth program. And basically the parallel fundraising in essence means like you go with lots of investors all starting at the same time, right? And you form the funnel with lots of warm introductions. most of investors activated in this process are going through warm introductions. And this sense of urgency, or so-called FOMO, fear of missing out, is actually created natively if you run this process that way. You don't have to artificially create that. You just need to manage it, right? You need to manage your timeline. And you can think of this as like you have over 100 investors in the pipeline, all activated within TruePaths, which can go to result to like 30 plus meetings, all done in like 2-3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on your capacity. And like, but it's all within month, definitely. And then you're starting due diligence with quite a few of them, right? If you're ready with your metrics, it's just statistics. So there is no way if you run like 30, 40 productive meetings, you won't get like a few due diligence started. And the successful outcome from this is to get to like 2-3 maybe discussions of terms with investors. Then you can run the process and you can try to get better terms. And but even if you get to one term sheet in this process, it's already a win because you did it in a very, very structured short time frame, and you can spend more time on business now, right? But remember, investors don't know how many other investors you're talking to, right? So they if you run the parallel process, it's very obvious to them because it's done very differently. You're signaling differently. You talk to them differently. So they would assume there are other investors who are also in the process who might be interested, right? So you manage this process stage by stage, communicating certain things to investors so you can move. And we'll talk more about this for those of you who will join the actual bootcamp. So we'll talk more about like how to manage this sense of urgency, right? But the learning here for everyone is if you have this warm process with lots of leads, and if those leads are chosen well, and if your metrics are good enough, you will definitely get to the terms, right? So the question is like how many investors should have in the funnel or how many interests. All of these we'll talk a little bit more in the slides. And this is just a citation from like what we learn when we like doing the Series A program at YC from Aaron Harris, which is one of YC partners. You basically creating this process of FOMA natively, right? So it's not that you are trying to create this or artificially or like push deadlines artificially. You actually just run the process as you are managing the fundraising campaign, right? And that this FOMA is created as a result. Another way of looking at the parallel process versus serial process is like you have only every single investor is started roughly at the same timeline. Yes, they take slightly different time to analyze what you just pitch, and they need to discuss with partners. Like different firms have different process. Some of them may discuss next day, others will take like 1 or 2 weeks. But if you start the process all at the same time, they're roughly moving at the same time, and information flows to them concurrently, right? And that creating time pressure on them. If you go sequential with most of us, like serial process, you just go lead by lead, right? Whether you're getting them from inbound, you're just happy that you receive a cool email from like investor. And this cool email, by the way, folks, like you should know also, like if you're getting inbound email from investor, that's very normal. Like it just means that you are decent, right? You're doing something which gets on the radar of analyst or associate in the VC firm, nothing more. There is no real investment interest. It's just meaning that you are somewhere on the radar of some investors. That's it, nothing else. So you should not treat this as, oh, they're interested, like, like we should start the process and everything. So yes, of course, you can work with this inbound, and you should work with this inbound. For instance, in the past, I included investors to our quarterly updates to keep them warm. But I never started talking to investors that they send me inbound email just because they send a cool email, right? If they're really seriously interested, they would find a way through your network to push you to the meeting. They will reach out to existing investor, to advisor, to like, you will be very creative on finding a way how to get to your meeting. But if it's just a simple cold email you get on an inbox, forget about this. Like just answer nicely and then just like add this investor to CRM and maybe keep them updated on your progress with monthly or quarterly updates if you want to do so, right? So another great thing about parallel process is you actually know this already. This is sales, folks. Like we all know how to do sales, right? So especially if you're in a B2B business, right? So there are similar stages with one exception, which is intro paths. Very normal to like any B2B sales. You do prospecting, so you identify the target investors and partners, and you do it by sector focus and the investment portfolio. And you build so-called short and long lists. Like short lists are typically short lists is those like best investors you think like you should approach first, and long lists like is much longer list of investors who most likely will end up approaching as well because of market situation right now. So in the past, people build like short lists only like 20, 30 VC firms. And long list maybe like 100. Now I recommend to start from 100 as a short list, simply because the market situation is so dramatically different from the past, right? And a long list can be as long as like 200-300 names actually. So intro paths for all of them, you have to have for short list at least you have to build these intro paths, and ideally primary and backup. So when we say intro paths, we mean like someone uh, who makes strong introduction when you're ready, right? So you're not asking for this interest prematurely. You only check if this person can make that intro, and then you register this in CRM, right? And there may be a second or third person who can provide you backup intro, right? So you end up having 200 plus intros requested but not activated before actual fundraising campaign. Then you prepare lots of double opt-in emails, right? What double opt-in means, I'll show you example, is essentially email that your connector, someone who asking for introduction, would be very easily and comfortable forwarding to the target, right? So this should be highly personalized email. It goes to your connector and then it is forwarded with very high conversion actually. From my passes, it's always over 50, 70%, depending on how well you work with your people who are connectors. And then you go into initial calls. This is essentially same as sales process. This is interest, right? And then you go to evaluation, which is due diligence in case of fundraising, and finally closing, right? Exactly same stages, and conversion between those stages can be different for different business, and it also depends on your traction, right? So if you talk about just specifically seed round, for Series A is actually taking longer. In the current environment, I do recommend to have at least 2 months. Simple preparation with lots of research done, like you're researching partners, you are actually understanding your metrics, you talk to peer founders, and we'll talk a little bit more about this during the next section. So you're essentially trying to predict the outcome of your fundraising by doing more research. Then you're building CRM. You're actually compiling this CRM with like 100 plus investors. And when we say investors, we mean partners, specific partners in VC firms, right? It's not enough just to add like this VC firm. You need to be specific there. And then you secure intro paths, right? As I explained. So 3 weeks, if you are well-connected person like myself, I have like over 10,000 connections on LinkedIn. Like we had a bunch of angel investors in from YC demo day. If you are not that, well connected, and we're talking about like very specific types of connections. So these 3 weeks can be 3 months for you easily, or 6 months. You need to build your network well ahead of time when you start raising. So like this is a situation that founder is experienced, connected well, all have like great cap table. Like you have like 10 plus angel investors, like who has great connections or great advisors on your cap table, right? And the final step is essentially preparing everything for the race, including your pitch deck. For people, it may take more time, but 1-2 weeks is typically enough for seed stage again. So here's example of like what we call like rigorous fundraising CRM, and I'll delve into actual example. And Alexander, I'll appreciate if you post a link in the chat from the source.
Oh yeah, we'll do.
Okay, cool. So basically, on this link I provided for the community, there are a couple of examples or templates or for CRM. There are like simpler, easier examples for seed round, and a couple of them there. And there is like more complex, sophisticated example for like Series A plus, right? Series A, Series B, and other rounds. So for like a lot of cases, like you just enough to give you like a VC firm, and like you can, by the way, manage this list of VC firm from this drop down template. This was just my list when I was doing like back in the days, like Series A, I believe. Of course, you want to go like partners, all these like scene deck or like rank. So sometimes you want to, some investors asking for the deck ahead of the meeting. You want to register this because you may want to run meeting differently, right? Then you have stage. There are like different micro stages. We talk about funnel, and these are like nuanced stages, so you can run the process more efficiently. And typical next meeting time, like if you run the meeting, like you definitely want to see, like if the meeting was successful, what is the expected next meeting, right? And then like date of last connection, this is the intro path, right? So how you connected to this person, and there is like feedback, and the rest is pretty obvious, right? Similar example, but with multiple partners. When you actually say like A16 that. So you have multiple, in our case, it was like multiple partners who were like relevant for us based on the research we've done. And we actually put a lot more research here. So I do recommend to start from something like this, because when you do partners research, you actually have multiple lines, right? And then you'll be exploring who can connect to this guy. And I had this like existing investor 1, 2, 3 advisors. This was all my cap table. We'll talk about this more. It's what we call a task force. And I then like put who they know. If they know directly, it's cool, but a lot of times they know through different partner, right? And that's also creating an additional layer of complexity on your double opt-in email. It will be like 2-degree email essentially. Say like, hey, existing investor, like as agreed, please forward it to Andrew Chen, and we say, or like ask Andrew Chen to forward it to essentially whoever your target partner is, Martin Casada. And that's and then you have like a body message with like Martin Casada address. We'll see the example of this, but basically, essentially, this template is really good if you do a lot of research on partners, which you should do actually these days. And then finally, this larger example, like a more sophisticated model, I don't want to dwell too much into this. We actually will go to these type of templates during bootcamp, just because you want to get like your edge, and you want to do more preparation like these days. But the main difference here is that you primarily target like several partners. All research, you have champion partner who is the main one. And then you have a bunch of other partners who essentially backup partners, put it that way, right? And then you do a lot of research on the firm itself. But again, like either seed template for seed, it should be fine, or this is actually pretty good examples. And finally, I want to talk about like my experience, and you guys probably think I am a maniac, but like I actually connected when I was doing deep tech company, Mighty Buildings. We are in the business of 3D printing homes. I actually connected, I removed the names, with over 180 founders who were in deep tech. And all of them were more senior than me in terms of fundraising, in terms of, where they were in the product life cycle. So you see, like they raised like pretty much sizable amounts of money, right? And this is amazing advisory board. Like I only turned a few of them to actual official advisors, but it was so easy for me to get interest because like all these folks like we're helping, like when I need like this or that intro, like typically free interest, you can ask peer founder on the fundraise for free interest and nobody would reject you, right? If you are like same or like maybe like a little junior than them, but they know of you, they know what you're doing. And what I did also to activate this, I kept them in our monthly updates, right? So I kept them engaged, right? Some people thought like I'm a little too annoying, but like it actually worked pretty well for me. I realized that okay. I realized I didn't share this CRM actually. Is this
Yeah,
Oops.
it might have been missing from the deck. Anyways, I think folks still found
Yeah, okay. I was
the
going
the
through all
Google
these
Docs
decks. Can
pretty
you make
useful.
sure like folks have the link, right? Oh, they have the
Yeah, I
link.
already shared it, so don't worry about it.
Okay, beautiful. Anyway, like I voice over everything, so like just was this was stuck on this slide. Anyway, let's move on. So basically, the key thing is like your CRM should be really rigorous, and then you should have a short and long list. And this is not reflected in the CRM because I always use a long list and only use like prioritization, like rank like one or two, like just basically within the spreadsheet I prioritize investors, right? But some people using short list and long list as separate spreadsheets. Let's move on. So one other thing you need to do before actually starting the process, you need to understand your conversions. Like, and this is very hard. You'll never get them from any open sources. So what is the actual conversion from reach out to first meeting? What is conversion from first to second meeting, then to due diligence and like IC or general partner meeting, which is typically a final stage of decision making process, right? So all these conversions are different for industry to industry. Like for instance, I learned that for deep tech it was different. It was much lower than for SaaS, right? Because in SaaS, like everything works pretty smoothly, right? If you have nice business, have clear traction, you approach investors properly, like conversion is like very standard. If you like unconventional business, and by the way, we'll share those conversions on from like SaaS, for instance, business. We have just from our past experience and other founders on actual bootcamp. But like the hack for you here is to talk to peer founders who recently raised. And the reason why you need those conversions, because you want to understand how many investors you should have in your list, in your short list. It may be a situation like for deep tech, for me, it was actually 200 investors, even in the good days, right? But like for current situation, maybe you might be in the industry which needs to have a lot of reach out just because you're like in a very competitive landscape, for instance, right? And conversions will be lower. So for some other more sexy applications, like in climate, it may be much smaller conversion or much higher conversion, which means like shortlist will be just 50 or 70 firms, right? In those you will prioritize. So that's something which would essentially define your CRM and list of investors there, how many investors you have there, and also define how much prep work you need to do, right? So basically, the key advice here: talk to peer founders in the same industry who recently raised the same round you're planning to do. If it's seed round, talk to now 2-3 founders who did seed round in the last 6 months, basically, and then you'll learn these conversions from them. Then this is the coolest question is how to understand which investor is yours. And I know that a lot of people don't care about that. They just like blast to thousands investors and but if you ever try that, conversion can be as low as like 1% from like massive reach out, right? But if you run like relevant campaign with warm introductions, the conversion from reach out to the meeting can be as high as like 30%, which was the case not only for me, but for my angel portfolio. We invested in a bunch of companies. And on average, if people run the process, the conversion tend to be like 20, 30%. These days may be slightly lower just because a lot of investors are not actively investing, but like 15 to 20% should be your target. So basically, how to understand if investor in principal interest in your business. So you look at sector focus, stage focus, obvious things. Typically, it's on the level of VC firm. Then you look at specific portfolio companies in which are the partners who are responsible for those investments, right? And then you dive deeper to like VC firm website, LinkedIn of partners, and finally you check conflict of interest. So you do a lot of this work, uh, prospecting investors, and essentially like each lead should be added with logic, right, to your CRM. And then you prospect interest, right? And you rank interest by, essentially I call it like strength, right? But essentially, this is not just probability of getting to the meeting, it is also probability of getting finance through introduction. If portfolio founder who is way ahead of you introduced to the same firm, they, let's say, they raise money at Series A or C, like there is a good chance you will like be treated super seriously, right? But for my past, for instance, if this founder doesn't know you well, so you didn't build connection ahead of time, it may not be, even if you're sending like this intro, it may be not treated that strong. The reason for this is because investors would always back channel with whoever make an intro in the process. Why you made this intro? What do you think about this founder, right? So you don't want to ask random people to make introduction for you, for sure. Then existing investors and advisors typically really great in power and both in this back channeling capability, because they would always be great, talking great things about you. They know you well, assuming you run like great, investor communications and relations, like monthly updates or like quarterly updates. So you have great investor relationships. So these people are your like main force, right? And then finally, like other founders same stage as you, like typically don't want to go like with founders who like pre-seed stages, because the intros will be weaker. They're still proving the product market fit. But peer founders, let's call them, same stage as you, they would also be great resource. Here is example of what double opt-in email you should be preparing for the entire list, right? So like we're reaching out to this SV Angel partner who was an investor in Mighty Buildings and asking to forward it to Joe from Bedrock Capital. And then we exactly mentioning why we want to talk to Joe, because he invests in Punchlists and did something else. So there is like this first, like always blurb, like you explaining what research you did, right? It's like showing to his partner you invested a lot of efforts. You understand that he understands that you are reaching out on purpose because you know he would appreciate the value proposition of your business, right? So it's like a normal human world, right? So if you want to try to build human connection, do your research and actually look at this as like top level target, like you're spending in business development, spending a lot of time, right? And then you're adding the blurb, right? Then you're adding the blurb, and that's great. So this is real stats from Mighty Buildings. Like we had 33% conversion to meeting from warm reach out campaign. But as I explained, now expect 10, 15%, maybe up to 20, depending on who's making on average interest. So what it means that ideally, if you want to get like 30, 50 meetings, and nobody knows exactly how many meetings you need for a company, you only talk by talking to other peer founders who recently raised. You can try to hack this number, but roughly 100 plus is actually a lower target. I would go like, I'm a safe guy, I would go for like 200 plus VC leads with warm introductions these days, like even though I have like a background, right? So like we'll be raising our next round in the next few months. We will be aiming for 200 warm VC leads. What actually means you need to have like 300, 400, 500 introduction paths. Lots of work, right? And that's one of the reasons why we decided to focus on automating of this work intently. And I'll talk a little bit more about this. But of course,
going
as I said,
great so far. So
you can actually do it manually as well. So let's talk about let's spend time on questions. I really want to make sure like we understand what parallel process is all about.
yeah. And but by the way, a lot of discussions in the chat. So you did steer the pot a little bit. I already see that we'll probably run out of our mark limit that we've set. But both me and Slava already had a chat that we are good to go for whenever it takes to share everything. So please stay with us if you have that. And perhaps one question that I singled out from those who have been asked. Obviously, you set some kind of timeline for the parallel process. What happens if the round is not closed by the date that you've had as the second limit, and how to avoid this kind of
So
worrying too much about that?
that's another great thing about like parallel processes. You actually see by stats how well you are, like by simple conversion. If you especially learn from other founders, if you're actually doing a good job, right? So so in the past, in the beta market, like people were like trying to do like coffee meetings, like coffee meetings meaning like you test your pitch and see how interested. And when you run those coffee meetings, you don't pitch. You're like sharing updates and you're trying to be social and everything. It worked for some founders. It worked, but now in the current market, people don't spend that much time on coffee meetings just because. So that's now a way to test if you're ready to raise or not. Unless this is a coffee meeting with someone investor who you know socially very well, right? If there are like 5-10 investors, you like be very open, like we're planning for raise, we don't know when. Like I would just love your feedback, right? So just keep it super casual. You can try to talk to investors. This is de-risking, like someone who you know very well socially. Existing investors who like both active at your prior round and next round can be great insight as well, right? Say like in our case, Costly invested seed round, but they also invested Series A, right? So they have data points, right? So there is no real way to guarantee anything. One thing I can tell about, um, if you did like a great parallel process, you can sleep well. Even if you don't raise, it means it's just impossible to raise in the current market condition with your metrics as it right now, right? You max out all your efforts basically. That's what it means, right? So then you like gently, respectfully pull back and updating investors like who were interested enough, right? That you decided to build more traction, you decided to focus more on the product sales, and just adding them to monthly update. And at some point, you may actually reverse the dynamics, right? Um, so of course, like obvious risk of parallel process is like if you go sequential, you're hoping that only very few investors would know that you raised, but it doesn't work that well. People talk to each other. They actually information dissipates. If you talk to 10 investors, that's it. They assume that everyone knows that you're raising, right? If you talk maybe to 1 or 2 or 3 socially, yes, you can control the situation. But if you talk to like 10, that's it. Like everyone knows you're raising and clock is ticking, basically. We go into back to the slides when like clock is ticking, you have like 8 weeks, maybe 16 weeks in the current environment max. Did I answer a question?
Think so, but yeah, I guess we'll have more more feedback in the chat. Anyways, let's probably move to
No, there are
the
hacks.
next.
There are
Yeah,
also hacks, right? So, like as always, like there are hacks, right? So, for instance, like I don't want to like share too much of this just because it's a little too intimate. Like, but like you can essentially have insiders in the process, someone who can preempt terms within parallel fundraising, right? And that can accelerate your process. It may be one of your existing firms who's so bullish that they say, "Look, guys, I want to preempt. I want to preempt." Or like someone who already was so interested. Like sometimes it helps, right? And then like new investors will say, oh, actually these guys are preempting. Maybe like we should also move to like, faster in the process. But like that's one of those things like which can sometimes help.
yeah. I see a question that is kind of repeating in some forums. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it, but I'll ask anyways. Folks are asking, how much traction do you need to have in order to be able to
Yeah.
kick off the
As I
process?
said,
Like,
like this
how are
is
you thinking about it?
industry to industry, sector to sector. I would say, as a rule of thumb, the more competition you have in your sector, the higher the bar for your metrics, right? The lower the competition, the more differentiated what you're doing, the lower the bar. So investors assume you would be able to build substantial value over time, or like your market would grow, right? If they're interested in your business. But those who are not interested, they would pass pretty quickly anyway. So that's one of the reasons why, like, you definitely want to try to focus on like more differentiated, more clear niches these days. Um, and of course, like talk to peer founders in the same niche, right? And just learn the metrics they had. And if they're not directly competing with you, there is no reason not to share. Like you really like you want to industry evolve, you want to just help your peer founders. So for me, it worked just perfectly, right? People are just sharing exactly what they. Of course, it's very private. You assume like whatever share on the call is never, you never used anywhere, right? So just for your own internal thinking, if you're ready for fundraising or not.
There's a follow-up. For example, if you were to consider mighty buildings as an example,
Yeah.
what would be the qualifying kind of metrics
I
for
wouldn't
the?
start mighty buildings in the current environment. Like, put it that way first, right? So, I mean, like, it's hard. It's really hard. Deep tech is not, unless it is climate related, maybe, right? But like, you definitely, as a repeat founder now, you definitely want to be sensitive to the climate, or like which sectors are more hot, less hot, right? So, like,
What
but
about what about
I mean,
intently?
like, just saying, like, it's hard. And it's not to say that I'm not inspired by mission. Of course, I'm. It's just harder to raise for something like mighty buildings, right? But like, if I were to start a deep tech company, or like another hard to fund sector company, I would just be I would be just doing a lot of prep work on the fundraising. And I would, even before starting up, when I was just at ideation stage, as again, this works for repeat founders, I would just build connection with like 20 plus investors, like obvious targets, and we'll just like compare notes with them, if you can afford this, right? So, because if you repeat founder, you can do that, right?
What about intently? I think more people will probably be able to associate with that as it's a SaaS of sorts.
Um, so what's the precise question? Can you tell me
Yeah.
again?
So, like, in the case of intently, what would be the needed traction in order to like
Yeah.
actually begin the
Yeah, we
raise?
already consulted with a bunch of founders. Like, we know, right? And plus existing investors. We know 20K MRR is like a few other metrics. Great for like seed round at like small step up valuation on YC demo day. Small, right? Like, and then like every single like so if you move from like 20K to 50K, there is maybe much higher, but still, like, there is like valuation multipliers these days are very become so much more realistic and reasonable, like, as they should be, right? So
For
like,
sure.
basically, by the way, valuation multiplier, another thing you can learn from peer founders who recently raised, right?
Absolutely.
So like, yeah, okay, let's move on. Let's
Yeah.
make sure like we cover within 10 minutes at least, if people have hard stop, because task force is actually a very important thing. So can you see my screen now? Yeah.
Yeah, we can. It's all good.
So yeah, task force is essentially people who can help you with connections. I already explained a few of those, and those people are making introduction either to VC, target VC partner, or to portfolio founder, who can actually, you need to jump on a call, build real connection, and they would connect you with 2 3 investors if your call was pretty good, right? So like, you essentially start building this advisory board, extended advisory board, or we call it task force. As we will probably just move faster here, like, as I said, like, obvious targets, you will definitely want to start as existing investors and advisors, then founders. Some founders you just know socially, repeat founders. They may not be active now, but from the past they know a lot of investors, so a great source as well. So, typical questions from founders who recently raised and ahead of you or ahead of you. Like, you can ask a lot of these metrics questions, like, but like, when you're ready, under which metrics, and then you ask about like how long each stage of the process took, like funnel conversion metrics. We talk about this, yeah. How to create competition or FOMO between investors. What did they use? What was a hack, right? And how to decide to choose investor if you are like in position to choose. That's great. And valuation multiplier is another thing which you definitely want to compare. You typically finish the call with like your investor prospecting research. You don't go like direct. I saw like these guys, like, great like investors. Like, can you introduce me to this? You asking open questions, like, I'm exploring a firm A, and this firm invested in his company, and what do you think of them, right? Like, everyone knows this language, right? If there is a good firm, a good reputation, and you run a successful call, like, you would get intro, right? But don't be like super direct. Just as in any human relationship, just build connection first. Ideally share something with this founder during this call. So like, and then you can ask for introduction gently at the end of the call. Plus, it's not just about asking intro here. You actually use this to prospect and put comments in your CRM, right? Hey, who is the best partner? You did already research, and then the founder see that you did research, and you ask him like I think of these 2 or 3 partners who I think is a great guy. Like, you should talk to my partner, or you like, it's very practical. So founders, when they like experienced founders, then they see that you did a lot of prep work, they treat you as a serious founder. You're just becoming a part of the same club, right? And then like it's just going so organic. You're just like, you're like friends already, right? So because they're decent founder, you're decent, like you're in the same club, right? So, and of course, when you build this connection, build it for future as well. So add those task force members, like peer founders, to your updates if it's not competitive for you. And then approaching for interest in future. Like, this is like a longer term network building, and something, by the way, like which is also great to do in any other sectors and of business development. Intently, for instance, we are like in this go-to-network automation, we are trying to look at how you build your network on a systematic level, right, with the help of AI, right? So I wouldn't give questions now, space for questions now, because I want to cover running the process real quick, and then we'll have like maybe we even like skip.
Yeah. Let's
Fuck up,
probably
we'll
do that
cover
at the
in
end.
Q&A.
Yeah.
So, like, essentially, very quickly, you build a weekly preparation plan and launch plan, right? Like some examples here, like I think recording will be available, so you can just see some examples. Like, this was done for Mighty Building. So our activation point was a demo day, physical demo, because we were doing the physical product. So one important thing in your fundraising is decide when you start. So essentially, three inputs here: have enough leads with warm interest. Without this done properly, you better not launch in the current market. Have a backup list ready, and then ideally, this is very ideally, identify a moment to launch when there is something great, like you just sign an amazing deal, right? B2B partner, sign an amazing customer, or you launch something public. There is a media announcement. So something we just did that in this reach out email, like it will be a great icebreaker as well, right? But this is highly optional. So I saw people raising without that. They just mention the client names in the reach out email, and that works as well. So some of these steps can be automated. Remember this funnel? So at Atlantly, essentially, we are automating prospecting, intro paths, and reach out campaign. You can do without automation, but like it's just so much manual work. In the past, I was using free interns, basically. Free interns who are like full-time working on this for 3 months, doing a lot of research. So, for instance, what you can do with AI, right? You can prospect VCs at scale, like just providing relevant companies and excluding those direct competitors, because you don't want to talk to investors of your direct competitors. And you use a lot of data, like LinkedIn, Signal, Crunchbase, and others, to essentially find all the relevant information for prospecting. You can also dive deeper into actual LinkedIn profiles, and at Intently, for instance, this is done with LLM. So there are a bunch of like indexing of profiles, which is done, and then you can run like a semantic search on them. So the idea here is like really getting to the list of investors, and then intro paths, right? So intro paths is the hardest part, because you definitely want to scramble like and analyze all your LinkedIn and analyze which are the existing investor advisors who they can make intros. And there are different ways to do that. I don't want to dive into details, but basically do a lot of prep work to really understand who is making which intro, and then update your CRM, right? Couple of examples super quickly, because we're running out of time. So for instance, like AI can be used to find relevant companies in situation then you cannot use sector search on like Crunchbase, right? So one of clients who intently Moonly, for instance, approach us with like a very specific app, and they have great traction and growth, but it was very hard to find relevant companies. So we had to like use a lot of semantic search there. 3D Prediction is now a company, and Moonly as well. They also wanted us to understand what are the best task force candidates. The challenge here, if you have like in your reach out list 200 investors, for each of you, which of those connections, depending on founder LinkedIn, you may have like dozens of possible connection points, right? Understanding who in your LinkedIn network is great candidate for this task force, who can make multiple interests, It's pretty challenging task, right? So outside of obvious targets like existing investors, etc. So basically, the message here: no matter using automation or not, you should have should have done a lot of prep work on building CRM, at least 100 plus VC partners covered by like 200 plus interests. So backup interests are great as well, because especially if you are like, it's not existing investors and advisors will forward, but others may not, right? So like there is 50% chance of forwarding the email, so 200 plus interests required. All pre-activated, meaning you talk to people or send email to them, and they're fine to make intro. They confirm they can make intro, and only when then you should final, and then we open the floor for questions. What are the typical fuck ups? Like this parallel fundraising, I share with so many founders and my angel portfolio, and like I saw only few actually did that process, because it's cumbersome. It's pretty expensive in terms of time, right? And the reason for this is not just time, but also I think there is a certain psychology block. Like a lot of founders not comfortable to approach a lot of people on scale for introductions, right? So I think it's more coming back to psychology of like getting like, not all of us are great at business development, put it that way. For me, it was so natural, like, but I know a lot of founders who like, maybe not naturally great at business development, right? So essentially a lot of this is just not having enough intro paths, right? Then I saw also people asking for intro, but instead of like checking before the process started that intro can be made, this connector, whoever is peer founder or other, just sending it directly to VC, right? And then you prematurely start the process. Everyone knows that you're already raising. You don't want to do that. You just building CRM, checking which interest can be made, but you're not asking for actual interest, right? 5 people at least in the task force who can make like dozens of interests, right? Because with founders, you can ask for 2 or 3 interests, right? And they can be great, right? But you need like someone who is actively helping you, like mentor, advisor. Existing investors are great for that, right? And sometimes also I saw use the intro path which wasn't warm enough, so you just like approach someone on LinkedIn who you may just don't know that well, and that's also like ideally you need to reactivate the connection first, jump on a quick call, and then like ask for intro. In terms of the process itself, I also saw like people are starting the parallel process, but then like pivoting towards like a batch process, or having multiple leads, and this becoming like a sequential serial process. Is just, there is no difference. You either parallel process, there may be just like 2 lists, right? Short list and long list. So short list is like whatever is now 100, depending on industry. Maybe for some is 50, like climate, I don't know. But like there is longer for 200. So that may be just 2 processes. That's it. But no like multiple lists, etc. Premature start when you're not ready. 100%. Everyone is doing that. Like I did that once. It was a disaster. So adding deck to link to email, right? So if you go warm, there is no reason to add your deck, because you adding blurb and some bullet points. That's enough. People will just jump on the call because they're curious. They get intro from some cool guy. They would spend time on you. You'll have these 30 minutes to present your business, answer questions and everything. So, and then finally creating too much artificial pressure. So I saw like masters of parallel fundraising, they're like over-engineering this and like, creating too much pressure on investors. These days, investors take their time. If it is like diligence, it may be easily a month. Like you can pressure it, but like a little bit, like just very, very gently, right? You can say, folks, like, like we are like, tell us what needs to be done, like, so we can move on the process, because other investors also, moving. So we hope to have like, some more productive discussion in the next couple of weeks or something like that, right? So you're going very gently. You're not trying to like put deadlines, right? So that's essentially it. Here is my LinkedIn and my email. You folks are welcome to send any questions there, either on LinkedIn or on my email.
Yeah, thanks, Slava. It was really great. I'm really enjoying the discussion and the chat and everything. All right, if you are done with this, if you could stop sharing your screen, I'll give a quick kind of commentary on the bootcamp launching next week, and then we'll move to the Q&A like promised. And just as a reminder for the Q&A, not only you can ask questions in the chat, but you can also request a call in if you're not afraid to be seen by everybody who's live now. And by the way, I love that most of the people stayed. So like more than 100 people stayed. So that's amazing. So yeah, let's do that. Let me quickly share my screen to show.
And by the way, you don't mind if I eat, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'll just give before I start, I'll give you like a little social story. Like, like when we were raising our seed round, like we went through like process, 40 investors before demo day. And then like someone from Coastal Ventures invited me, and this partner was like literally eating during the meeting, and he asked like, guys, you don't mind? Like I had like back-to-back meetings. Can I eat, please? Like, is that sure? Like, and he was like literally looking at the plate and then sometimes looking at the screen. So I felt like it's a disastrous meeting, like was absolute disaster. But then I learned it's American culture, and the guy was actually doing his job because they wanted, Vinod actually himself wanted to meet us, but he was just checking that we probably can pitch. I don't know, like because you're international founders or something. Like he asked some questions, but it was like a gatekeeper basically. So
yeah, that's a funny story. Yeah. Well, if you eat, don't forget to mute. That's probably the only thing that's needed. Yeah. Anyways, so in terms of the bootcamp, we're kicking off on the 12th of February, so meeting next week. There are still a few spots left, and I added a QR code. Just like open your camera, you'll be able to open the link with all the details and be able to book a screening call with me. If you want to apply, I do have a bunch of calls lined up for next week. So, obviously the sooner you do that, the more chances you have to get in. But it's a good thing that we want to run this as something that goes on a constant basis every month or so. Because for me and for Slava, and by the way, I'm not sure if I even introduced myself, but I am also an experienced entrepreneur, probably not as experienced as Slava in terms of like later stage companies, but I did build quite a ton of cool stuff, and even have an exit under my belt. But yeah, we do want to run this on a constant basis. So even if you're early now, still you can still apply, you can still chat with me, and we'll consider you for next cohorts that we're gonna run. And in terms of what you want to expect, so essentially, Slava didn't hesitate to share all the meaty stuff today, but obviously there are many more, right? In terms of like how he ran his processes, et cetera, et cetera. What we want to do with the bootcamp is to provide kind of a playground where not only we have a chance to kind of share with you all of the nitty-gritty details during practical workshops that are happening every Saturday, but also to kind of give you a chance to just interact with us one-on-one, live, async, et cetera, et cetera. And probably one of the most important things here is that you'll get a committed task force from kind of day zero if you're fundraising, because a lot of founders are, not a lot of founders, all of the founders are actually raising now, either Series A or seed. And so, they're similar staged, they are similar level, and so you'll be able to use them at your fundraise. And I know that it works pretty well because I already ran such boot camps for pre-seed founders last year. And so we are pretty sure that this will be even more useful.
Right? Peer pressure.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
you want to be disciplined. And the way to be disciplined is there is a peer pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, also do expect private networking events and kind of Q&A sessions with fellow founders and VCs. So that's also part of the deal. Yeah. So anyways, hopefully you've had a chance to kind of, scan the QR code and check this out. But if not, again, just like I mentioned, I'll share this in a follow-up email. But there is a chance there wouldn't be more spots available for the bootcamp that's starting now. So
let's open the floor for questions, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Whichever remaining. Questions.
Yeah.
Call in.
So feel
Let's do
free to
call
call
in.
in. Yeah, we'll prioritize call-ins, I think, right? And if not, I'll just go and ask some of the questions that are in the chat that are still unanswered. Okay, while we're waiting for the call-in, I have a question that's actually related to pre-seed. So, like, Pavel asks, how does
Like,
the
Alexander, I feel like I'm on the radio, like, oh, we're waiting for call, waiting for call. Like, like, yeah,
yeah
like, sorry, like, just.
yeah? So the question was, what changes for pre-seed? Because I guess some of the folks who are listening may not be
Yeah,
yet at the
like the
stage
main
where
difference between like pre-seeds in seed and Series A is actually talking to institutional folks at seed stage. They may be micro VCs, they may be seed firms, but there are like they set up as a funds, right? There are partners, like people who run the fund. There are people who gave money to this fund, and the mentality and decision-making process is very different from those who invest their own money, which are typically you raise from angels at pre-seed, right? Like those angels either like interested or not. Very few angel investors have like real diligence process. Very few angels are like really trying to like wash out your brains, right? So investors may, right, like institutional folks. Plus they see more deals, right? Institutional folks see way more deals, right? So like you definitely want to hit the bar, like next bar. In pre-seed, like a lot of money raised if you're like great talker, like you just raise from like personal networks and like those angels who know like friendly entrepreneurs, etc., right? So at seed stage, if a great talker is just one of 10 things, right? So you have to have traction, you have to do a lot of prep work, like all of these things are important, right? So like that's probably the main difference.
Nice. One more question that I see is kind of how to industrialize the process of getting these potential intrapaths if you're not there yet. Like, any hacks
That's
beyond kind of
something.
using
That's something we're
automation?
trying to hack a little bit intently, but like we're not trying to, industrialize it. Like we're trying to empower with your existing networks. We're trying to empower you with just more tools, right? You can understand who is the great people in your LinkedIn who you actually should get as advisor, or like someone who can actually actively help you, right? Things like that. So it's very hard to build network from scratch. Uh, but we saw a couple of clients, for instance, at Intently who came with no big networks in American VC world, for instance, right, or like American entrepreneurial world, and then like and they want to raise there, right? What to do in this situation? You just build your network first. So like there is a sub product Intently is currently building is just building a network, and it doesn't have to be with AI. You just like normally, as in the past, you just build your network, talk to other founders, build these connections, build these human connections. AI can just help accelerate this process, catalyze this process. But as a rule of thumb, if your task force cannot be set up with your existing force, with existing LinkedIn and connections and investors, you actually need to invest more time in building this network first. That's what I would recommend. Just go to peer founders who raise money in your sector, build great human connections with them, and turn them as advisors.
What's the one hack on like how to build these?
I call those founders Series A friends. So just build more Series A friends. My view on accelerators beyond why I will be careful because I don't know the current stats, but in the past, YC had like 10 times better conversion, like in terms of demo day to amounts of money you intended to raise, right? Because like, yes, like other accelerators can say like our demo day is all successful, see the raise. But like if you ask founders, they plan to raise like whatever, and they raise like much smaller amount, right? So YC was like consistently delivering these like amounts that founders actually needed. Very few founders didn't raise as much as they needed for the first round. So there are specialized accelerators. If you're like more about market development or like business development things, definitely go to specialized accelerator. But in terms of fundraising, I think YC is still the top one. There are like few niche for Stanford alumni and things like that, but most of participants in this call are not just able to qualify for those.
Slava, we do have a couple call-ins, so let me let Konstantin
A
in,
couple of.
and then
I was talking about YC. Oh yeah, cool.
I glitched for a bit.
Hi
Yeah,
guys.
Konstantin, you're live, so yeah, feel free to ask a question.
Decided that it would be slightly set without calls all along, and we need a little bit of more live chat. So I have a question about events, like pitching events, like conferences. Is it the real deal, or for now, when a lot of pitching and a lot of communication goes online, it's more of extra?
Folks, like pitch events can definitely work because I mean, if you win the pitch event, like which is getting lots of attention, like whether it's like web summit or something like this, like those like larger events can work, right? I saw a lot of people like who are like staging their at larger startup events, they're getting their funding, right? And like lots of investors who like Tim Draper who love investing in that way, right? So like just that works for sure. There is certain competition, but like that's if you want to rank me like other accelerators, not YC, like it's better than non-YC accelerators. Just if you win some pitch
Because
competition,
straightforward, right? Because you don't kind of
very
invest
straightforward.
three months to understand.
Plus, you can use it in your like investors updates. You can like position yourself as a winner of something, right? So like that's great for
Yeah.
media as well. Like lots of media attention to those, because typical accelerators don't get as much media attention for them a day as like YC's getting, but also like because batch is pretty big these days, not all the companies getting enough attention from media.
And is it viable to do like at every stage, even before you start parallel fundraising? So like, a short dry run or like a trial, or it's better if you get prepared for parallel fundraising and only if you're already raising, get to
Well,
events.
when like dry run can be done, but dry run, as I said, like you do with investors you socially connected with, very well connected, maybe existing investors or socially connected investors, and this you won't call it dry run. You just like call it like mock pitch or like coffee meeting, if you want to test where you stand with metrics, but. Be careful who inviting to those because you don't want the information that you're raising actually
Okay.
goes too much to the market. Be very communicative and open. Look at this as just like we want to understand where we are, right? So we've been building business, market dynamics is changing. We want to understand where we are. What do you think about this? What do you think about this 20K MR? Like investors who know socially will probably tell you what they think.
And
but it's
other
not
like
trying to raise from them. You're
clear.
just trying to get from your metrics, right?
And like to finish it up, other any particular events that you consider worth it, or case by case for different industries could be different ones, etc.
I didn't get your
Is
question.
there like
So
is there like a clear YC combinator analog in pitching events, like 2-3 events that?
yeah, I wouldn't tell you. Like it's different for like I mean, obvious like big conferences for sure. Like startup conferences. I mean, but some like VCs don't go to Web Summit anymore for obvious reasons, right? So like because it was like a situation that happened last time.
Yeah.
So I it's hard. It's hard. You need to track.
Okay.
That's and also another great thing about like pitching events is just you're like not raising in a way, but you're pitching, and then if you win, like you can open the round, right? So like you can organically start round from like winning or like becoming semifinalists at some pitch event.
Okay.
That can be done. I saw people do that.
Thanks a lot. Alex, how it works? Should I kind
Thanks,
of get
Konstantin.
out so you will be able to get someone new? Okay.
Yes, I'll remove you in a sec, but thanks for the question.
Okay. So like we can just go one by one, like, but or you just like voiceover.
Yeah, we do have a couple of more call-ins. So let me invite Henry and then also Ivan, and then you'll be able to just go through questions one by one.
Hi Slava. Hi Alexander.
Hi.
Hello from Finland, where it's very dark and cold.
Okay.
I'm the co-founder of a 3D printing concrete company called Hyperion Robotics, and actually, I know Alexei, your previous co-founder,
Yeah.
who
Beautiful.
who advised us to join the webinar. One perhaps quick question: how do you communicate to your investors about the fact that you are building a deep tech hardware startup, and they shouldn't expect the revenues or traction numbers that they might find in SaaS businesses? So how did you find those for
Hard,
Mighty Building?
very hard. So that's
Mm.
one other reason. Like that's why I said like I wouldn't start like mighty buildings in this current environment, because like there are simpler and easy way to make money now. Like there are certain sectors that are growing really well. Like AI is like amazing. Like lots of things are changing. There are certain problems there, like because like ChatGPT per se like is no longer a platform and other things, but. To answer your question, I would just focus on signing like a partnership would be meaningful, big enough. Even if it is just a pilot, some like larger deal, I would just focus on brands, right? We, for instance, like at Series A, we signed a partnership with one of the largest developers. Eventually, this didn't work out for us for various reasons, but it actually was a great momentum, and like that helps, right? If you can sign a larger deal, even if it is just a pilot, which can result into a larger contract, that's for sure can help you. I
Thank
just
you.
focus on that. Yeah, man.
Great.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks for joining. Okay. Not sure if we have any more call-ins. Ivan was there, but I'm not sure if he's there anymore. But yeah, guys, if anyone
Okay,
else
let's
wants to
go.
join, feel free to do that. But otherwise,
Yeah,
Slava,
let's
yeah, if
go.
you could just go through the chat
Yeah, we
and
can
just
go from like bottom. It's easy for me if you don't mind.
yeah, sounds good.
Apologies, folks. Like I know some of you have been waiting for a while. I was preparing financial documentation. You know, if you're at seed stage, get your head of finance, folks. Like, I'm not a financial guy. Like, I mean, definitely do your reporting, like whatever you have to do, right? Financial model, obvious thing, right? So, but like, I'm trying to delegate things like that. How do you evaluate on average? How do you is necessary? Not for sure. Like after COVID, it changed. You don't have to live in the valley at all, right? But you need to have networks in the valley. But a lot of people immigrated from the valley to other states and Mexico, etc. So you just build your global founders network. You definitely want to have market in America, or like subset of your market, global market in America, because it's very hard to raise in US if you don't have the market there, right? But like you these days, again, a lot of industries are becoming so global that it's hard to say how much of the market you need to have there. How can I promote a social startup, or what is this? I don't know. But then nowadays come to a self-fundraising. I don't look at this way. You definitely want to have, if you're raised in US, you definitely want to have a legal status to be there, right? Like whether it's like O1 or something else, even if it is B1, B2, but you're like proceeding for O1, that's also fine for seed round, but like you want to be in the process. Whether you want to come, sure, like if you can, if your visa allows to come, but I saw people raising without that, right? If they like have the networks and the build networks, so you definitely want to be deal aware, C corp, potentially with California registration, if you hire people there. But these days also people don't have California registrations anymore. It used to be a playbook. Now just deal aware C corp and just have a market there in US, so you can pitch their investors, lead investor, be a co-investor. So we're talking about lead. So we're talking about people who can price the round, because co-investors are really not worth spending time on in the process earlier, just because they
In the
so many
beginning.
people co-invest, right? So like you definitely want to look in the lead investor who can price, and the rule of thumb here, like at least 30% of the round, right? 30. I did my Series A with 20% lead, but it was exceptional. So ideally have 30%, because if you have decent investor putting 30%, so much easier to get co-investors. And you can reapproach a lot of your funnel who are like moved in the process to like diligence once you have a lead term sheet to become a co-investor, to get as a co-investor, because that can be easily converted, so much easily converted, right? Do you do mostly pitching online? Yes, these days, yes. It's weird to have an in-person meeting as a first meeting these days. What's your view on the accelerators beyond? Okay, getting ready for the process for CC, but in the deep tech, we're between pre-seed and yeah, there is a difference in type of investors you're approaching. What the best career path to pursue? So I was a VC, connected with a lot of founders as a VC. So, but I can't recommend you become VC to get founder connections. Like lots of founders are so open for connections. Just do it ahead of time. Just don't do it right away, like at the round kickoff, right? So like just do it like 3 months ahead. Build social connections. It's a chance to ask detailed question. So what changes for a pre-seed process attraction going to raise rounds? Potential investors list. I didn't get this question. Still have a question. I think that's it pretty much. Like I don't see, folks. If I didn't answer a question, put it down to the list.
Yeah, or I also wanted to say, if you do have more questions, you'll be able to just reply to the follow-up email, and if we do get a bunch of them, we'll try to reiterate with Slava and just give you some answers and a sync.
Oh, there is a crowdfunding. We talk about physically located in the US. We already answered. Like should have clients in US, Delaware registration for sure, but you don't have to be physically located these days. But you definitely want to have ability to be there, right? If you're like clearly explaining like you're in Mexico, you're there, all that, like, but your market is in US, and there are reasons why you're not in US. It's fine, like because it's cheaper to develop. It's whatever historical reasons. I saw people are doing this all the time now. You should plan to come once in a while. If you do that, like spend some time in the valley for sure. This crowdfunding can be taken as black mark for follow-up raising from. No, not really. But I wouldn't put it in a Crunchbase. I mean, like if you can avoid, like, I definitely don't want to like position this. But like if it like emerges as in diligence, it's fine. Like just raise money, or you like do very successful crowdfunding. Like if you're like very successful, then you can share it. But investors would. It's very hard, tricky question. Like I'm less familiar with this. Like if you're getting like crowd equity, valuation may be they may be less sensitive valuation than like great VC firms. So that's a little bit harder question to play around. Depending how much dilution take, when was this public funding? If it was like some time ago, sure. If it is all done concurrently, you need to play valuations well. You potentially want to give sweetener to VCs because they treat them as institutional smart money and like public money is like more like just money. Okay. So no problem at all if it was a previous round. Okay. Well, like for seed round is just financial model deck and some proof on the metrics, right? A lot of times it's enough. Maybe legal docs on the company. For Series A, it's way more, right? It's depending on the business. Yeah. ChatGPT will answer a question on data room. Thanks a lot, everyone, folks. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Really
Thanks
enjoyed
a lot
the
for joining.
questions and the audience this Sunday. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Slava. That was super useful. All right. I'm gonna stop the recording. So yeah, have a nice Sunday, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.